What is covenant leadership? Well, I want to begin with talking about the vases of old. Way back in Bible times, people used vases for everything. They carried their things in them as they traveled. They stored their items for their home in it, whether it be liquids or solids. And the more beautifully they were painted, they would pay more money for them. And they were sold everywhere. But what they had trouble with was sometimes they would have to ask, was this without wax? Did this vase have integrity? And they literally meant, did it have any wax in it? And because this is what vases could look like underneath all that paint, all these cracks. And they could fill it in with all that wax and then paint over it. You wouldn't even see it until you put things inside of it. A liquid would start to leak out. So integrity meant without wax. And we use that same term today, meaning, how do you look when no one's looking? And the same thing, how is that pot when no one can see underneath it? So what is covenant leadership? Well, according to Berger in 2019, he said it's a contract, it's a treaty, and sometimes it's like a will between two people. And Woolard goes farther and says it's a partnership between two different people or two different parties. It could be two groups. And they binds them together. They work together to reach a common goal. And it can include oaths or signs, sometimes ceremonies, but it's always relational and personal. God, He's a covenant God. We know that He makes covenants, He keeps them, and He always fulfills them. He's done several throughout time. He did one with Noah. His first one was with Noah. He made a covenant He would never let it rain and destroy the earth again. His covenant was a symbol, that sign was the rainbow. He made one with Abraham, Moses, David, and Jesus made the last covenant with us. So what are my core leadership values? First off, integrity. I want to live without wax. I want to be that pot that can hold water and not leak. And according to Heathfield in 2001, integrity means having a strong ethical principles that you can follow all the time. And I want to demonstrate that in my life with moral and ethical principles. I also feel that I'm very visionary. I like to provide a clear vision to people of the future and what the future of our organization holds. I want to inspire people to work towards that vision, and that I just really love doing that. Also, I want to empower them. I want to give them an opportunity to be part of that vision. I want them to use their expertise and their judgment to be part of that vision so that we can own it together. I also am very trustworthy. I'm loyal and I keep my promises. I don't have room, as McCoy says, for deception, deviousness, or tricky practices. I like that. No tricky practices. Because sometimes we think it's okay to do a little thing. No, if it's a little trick, it's not being trustworthy. And I love that pinky promise we used to do as children, that we will promise that we will keep our word. Lastly, I have a passion that drives me to teach and motivates me to teach future teachers also. I'm reminded by Collins, in his book, he talks about the hedgehog and how the hedgehog knows one thing. And he does that all the time, and it drives him for protection. He curls up in a ball and he uses his little pines behind him to protect him. And that's all the hedgehog knows to do. And he rolls in a ball and he rolls everywhere he goes. But that drives him. And that's what I want to be like as well. So back in the beginning of my class, not my class, but of my doctoral walk, I took an interpersonal leadership class. We took our strengths and we built off of that, and we learned what our strengths was. And one of my strengths was I built relationships with people. I like to look at what people's strengths were and make them part of the whole and incorporate what they are into the organization. I have a drive that motivates me and keeps me motivated to do things. I'm very responsible. I like to help others be successful. I'm wrapped, and I think if we were to wrap my current leadership values of passion, integrity, casting, vision, and empowering of others, and my trustworthiness, these are all wrapped up into this. I see my passion in my drive, my integrity, that overlaps everything. My vision casting and empowering of others, that's that building relationships and helping them to be successful. My trustworthiness, that undergirds everything that I am. So I'm still me. I'm just a little more defined than I was at the beginning of the class. Well, as all of us, we go through crucibles and wilderness experiences. And I'm going to just go over a few of them and how they changed my life. My first wilderness was in 1977 when my mom and dad got divorced. I was only 11 years old, but it was like it started a path on some things that were going to happen in my life. My mom was an alcoholic, and that was part of the reason my dad divorced her. I lived with my mom at first, and then I went back to live with my dad. And I kind of went back and forth and just felt very alone. Even though my new stepmom had 4 kids and my 2 brothers were there, I just still felt alone. Then my mom passed away, and about 6 months later, my great-grandmother passed away. And I think it was just a series of events, and it culminated with my great-grandmother, because I went to my dad, and I remember telling him, Dad, I'm afraid. I'm afraid for great-grandma, I'm afraid for my mom, and he reassured me that my mom went to heaven. But he said, but my great-grandmother may not have, and she probably went to hell. And, he didn't tell me about me, but boy, did that scare the daylights out of me. And because of that wilderness, I led myself to the Lord, and I'm a born-again Christian because of that. A couple years later was my first crucible. For 2 years, my family was divided. It was her side and his side. We were divided in our home as well as in our church. You could literally walk down the aisle of our youth group and see who was on my side and who was on my stepbrother and sister's side. It culminated with divorce, and my stepmom and my dad got divorced. But the good thing about this, my dad and I got a new relationship out of this, and he and I got closer. The next 2 years, the years before I went away to college, the year before I went away to college, we were the closest we were. A couple years later was my first wilderness. I wanted to go to college. I really did want to go, but my dad wasn't able to help me, so I went to work. But all my friends went to college. And at my youth group, they went to college, and from my high school, they went to college. And I went to work downtown all by myself. But I saved money, saved a lot of money. And then I took that first flight of mine to go to Chicago, go from Chicago to San Diego to go to school. It was a tearful flight to say goodbye to my dad. But the benefit was it started my teaching career and led me to where I'm at right now. My loneliest wilderness of all was just a few years later. I felt like I was on the outside of my family, that I was kind of above the table looking down on them, and was always kind of the outsider looking at my family and through the window of the house, basically, and looking at them inside. I learned that my kid's dad was living a double life. It resulted in our divorce. I lost my home that we rebuilt, designed, everything in there I wanted. I lost my marriage, and I lost my son for a while. That was a very difficult time. A couple years later, I had a very crushing crucible. I had been on a job hunt for many months while I was working still in San Diego for a job here in Chicago, because I knew I needed to move out here to be near my dad. Flew out multiple times to look for jobs, applied to a lot, sent resumes to a bunch. But then I had a job lined up, and then I didn't have a job. And then I finally had one lined up again, second one, and so I moved. It was the end of school. I packed up, kind of like and loaded up the truck and headed to Beverly, loaded up the truck, and we headed to Chicago. I moved out here, and only to find out that after I left my uncle and moved down to Kankakee area, my job wasn't no more. I ended up using my retirement to live off of, and then if it wasn't for JCPenney's hiring me to work in their jewelry department, I don't know, that was the beginning of the churn that I believed in myself. The benefit of that was I learned to be humble. I learned to be very, very humble. I had never worked retail. This job was not in my expertise. I worked with a bunch of 18-year-olds, and I was not 18, but I learned to really love to work there. About 2 years later, I did end up getting my first job in the district that I'm in right now. I got a job teaching in the junior high, and that would be my next crucible. When I was hired, the principal told me I needed to be an island, that there were other teachers that did not like what was changing in the district and wouldn't like me because I represented that change, and that I needed to be that island all by myself, and that their water was going to wash up on my shore, but I needed to make sure that that water didn't wash me away. The lesson I learned from that crucible was to carry a pail with me at all times. A fire needs a pail, and I can either bring fuel to that fire and fan that fire along, or I can add water to that pail and put that fire out. And I learned that how important it was to bring water to that fire. And each time that things happened there, I brought water and I tried to put that fire out. A couple years later, I was in another wilderness, and I actually beat death several times. This is when I had my brain aneurysm. Should have died on the driveway. Should have died with that first ambulance. Then the ambulance had a flat tire. Should have died there. Got to the hospital. No life flight. Couldn't go. Should have died. They drove me from Kankakee to the north side to the hospital. They put in a coil, but the bleeding still, all it did was stop the bleeding. The blood was still flowing in my head. I lost 3 months of my life, and I literally have just a few moments of realism from that time. One of them, I do remember thinking, I wish I could die, because I knew how my fiance was sad, and I just knew something was not right with me, but I didn't know what. They put in the shunt, and it was like slowly all of my losses came back, and just have a few deficits, but I'm back, and I'm really appreciative. And two big things: I gained a great understanding of my students when they're sick and they miss school because they're sick. I also a great appreciation for life. I love life. Love it. So, what is the EDD? I looked at the EDD as a way of gaining respect and increased opportunity in my career. My line of work, I should say. I also looked at it as a possibility of increased income. It could replace missing future income that I wasn't going to get because of my divorce. How do I think I'm going to transition into this from this EDD? Well, first off, there was an opening. I was told that this program was open and I could do it when the representative came to my school. I was excited. When I called the college, it was closed. They didn't have it anymore. I called them back. I said, no, this is who I spoke to, et cetera, and they opened it back up. The results, I was in cohort 20. We called ourselves Dos Equis. We were so close. Loved that group of people. I still communicate with them. They just graduated this last May. Then I had my aneurysm, and I was removed from that cohort. I was moved into cohort 24 and went online. Totally different program. But I knew this is where God wanted me to continue. Then the next big change in my life is my dissertation. It went through so many changes, going from the cohort 20 to cohort 24, different professors leading me. I changed my topic of my dissertation several times. But now I'm finally done with 3 chapters, and I'm on to the IRB and waiting for their approval. Where am I going now? Now this is where I want to follow from the King James Version of the Bible, Abraham's life. In Genesis 17:5, in the covenant that God was making with Abraham, he changed his name from Abram to Abraham, and my name is going to change also. I'm going to receive a doctorate. I'm going to be Dr. Sherry Silva or Dr. Silva, however I will be addressed. In verse 6, God says that he was going to make nations of Abraham and that kings would come from him. And I believe that I'm going to be teaching teachers, future teachers in all America. They're going to go throughout the country of America, and some are going to go to the mission field to different nations. Some will also go past teaching and go into leadership in education and maybe even be future administrators and do changes for education. And that would be equivalent to the kings that in Abraham's life. Verse 13 says that he's going to establish this in all of Abraham's house. And I look at this as I wanted to help my fiance. He, like I, went through a horrible time where neither one of us have a retirement, and I want to make a retirement that both of us can have so that we can live happy and be at peace and live at the same lifestyle that we want to be at. Verse 18 says that God was going to extend the covenant to strangers in Abraham's land that were part of Abraham. And I look at Olivet. I'm a stranger in Olivet's land. I don't know anybody at Olivet, unlike I do at other places. So, why am I choosing Olivet? Well, first off, way back when they had a purple and gold days, my daughter and I flew out from Chicago, from California, here to view the purple and gold days. We were just amazed as we got our tour. We were introduced to Dr. Bowling and all the people, and Dr. Bowling came past us a little while later. He remembered my daughter Rebecca's name, and it just blew her away, and it blew me away too. I've also had many candidates for teaching in my classroom here, and I'm just in awe at how awesomely they're prepared, how polite they are, and just the integrity that they all have. And then the mission statement of Olivet. It says that they provide a high-quality academic instruction for the purpose of personal development. That's right up my line. I want to develop people. Career and professional readiness. I want to help people in their career. And prepare individuals for lives of service to God and humanity. And I want to empower people to live an awesome life as well. So I feel like my mission statement, Olivet's mission statement goes along right with my covenant qualities. How do I plan my transition? Well, in September of this year, I hope to finish my research. I'm hoping that I will get IRB approval so that I can do my research once school starts, and I hope to be done with all that by September. October of this year, I'll be finishing my coursework. I'll be done with my last class, which will be like hallelujah. And then in November, I'll get my degree confirmed upon me. I'll go through all that process of getting my degree, and then it will become official in May of 2022 that I'll be graduating. This has taken over 3.5 years, a long time, because of my aneurysm and a couple little bumps in the road. But I know it's going to be great. So what am I going to do in December? Because that December would be right after I'm confirmed. I want to celebrate. I'd like to go on a vacation. I'd like to do something really fun and great. January through March of the next year, before my graduation, I got some inside projects to do in the house that I'd like to take care of. Some things that, you just kind of push aside because there's not enough time. I got little piles, I should say some big piles doing. And I got some outside projects I want to work on. Some painting that I want to do, some lawn ornaments that I have that just need, I bought everything I needed, but I have not had time to work on them. And this January through March of next year is where I plan on finishing those projects and just completing those loose ends around the house, inside and outside. April, I really want to do nothing. I don't want to work on any kind of projects. I just want to putz around the house and just be me. I'll be working, but May of 22, that's graduation. I can't wait. And I want to start pursuing my career at that time because then it's official and I can do that. My goal is by the following year in September of 23 to be starting my new career. That is my covenant leadership and my transition plan to it. My references, here's my references, some awesome information from Berger, and my final references. So going back, I want to encourage all of us to live without wax. Are we this beautiful pot? Or are we really this pot with the cracks in it, just painted over? Do we have that integrity in our lives?